Welcome back in, everyone, to the Boston Celtics Newsfeed, powered by CLNS Media. I'm Mike Walsh, manager of the Celtics Newsfeed, and this is Day 10 of our 2017-18 NBA preview. We'll be going in alphabetical order, releasing a new team preview each day leading up to opening night, October 17th in Cleveland. Before we get started, some quick news. I want to mention that the CLNS Media team was all over Media Day Monday, and all of our coverage is up at the YouTube page at youtube.com/CLNS Media. They've got continuing coverage at training camp in Rhode Island this week, and they'll be back up at practice Friday in Massachusetts. CLNS will also have full coverage of both preseason home games, so subscribe, youtube.com/CLNS Media. Don't miss a thing. Each of these preview podcasts will be accompanied by an outline blog post to our site, clnsradio.com. Today I'm going to be speaking with CLNS Celtics Editor at Large Cory Prescott about the LA Clippers. The Clippers didn't quite blow it up this offseason, but have moved on from Chris Paul, and they got a boatload in return from the Houston Rockets to pair up with Blake Griffin. So without further ado, let's get into Day 10 of the Boston Celtics Newsfeed's 2017-18 NBA season preview with the Los Angeles Clippers and Cory Prescott. All right, Day 10 here on the Celtics Newsfeed, 2017-18 NBA season preview. CLNS Celtics Editor at Large Cory Prescott on the line. He's going to talk to us about his preview for the Los Angeles Clippers. Another good team in our rundown here. Cory, how are we doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Mike. I have my coffee and a little breakfast in me, so I'm ready to go and talk about the Clippers of the West Coast.
Yep, this is bizarrely early for us to be up and doing this, but we're going to power through for the fans out there, the fans of the Clippers and the Celtics, because this is a matchup that'll take place twice during the regular season. And then, as we'll find out later on, what you have the Clippers doing next year. But the Clippers have been, for the last few years, a team that has at least threatened to come out of the West. And things haven't, they've threatened up until a certain point, especially last year. They finished 51 wins, the 4 seed. They wind up losing at Game 7, as you write, to the Utah Jazz, to Gordon Hayward, and the Utah Jazz now on the Boston Celtics. But another disappointing postseason for them, and they kind of do a half measure, you think, or are you satisfied with the move they made?
Yeah, considering the what it could have been. They could have lost Blake Griffin and Chris Paul in an offseason, and despite what you might think of both those players and whether they can win the playoffs, losing both of those guys for nothing would have been just catastrophic. They re-signed Griffin. It's a very high risk, high reward deal. Considering his injury history, considering he won't be back until mid-December, but he gets 5 years, $173 million. That put him right out of the ballpark, because I know the Celtics were kind of looking at him as a fallback option if Gordon Hayward fell through. But they lose Paul, very talented point guard, but he kind of had this act going in LA where it was tough to play with. You could kind of see it on the court. He's very kind of petulant and just overly aggressive, overly passionate. It can wear on guys. It's an 82-game season, long season. A lot of the young guys kind of tune him out. And after a while, you run back the same team and the same team over and over again. After a while, it just becomes stale, regardless of how the guys treat each other, regardless of the chemistry. But they did actually manage to get a sign and trade out of Paul. Paul could have left via free agency, just gone outright to anywhere. Decided he wanted to go to Houston, but to fit the salaries, took Daryl Morey quandary of role players and young guys, and there's even a first round pick in there. So it wasn't catastrophic with their offseason. They also brought in Danilo Gallinari. I'm not sure what your opinion on him is, but off injured, very talented, but it's when you pair Gallinari with Griffin, there's a lot of injury time in those two guys.
Yeah, you bring up two players that we've actually already talked about on the preview sort of preseason that we're running through here. First off, Chris Paul. We talked about him with Vince Rodemer in his Houston Rockets preview. We talked a little bit about his issues with the Clippers. Obviously, we can get a bit more into it today. He didn't seem to think it was going to be a huge effect. He only increased their wins by, I think, a couple, but that was mostly, as a result of playing in the Western Conference and what's going to be just an outrageous Western Conference. Just keeps getting stronger as Carmelo makes his way there, as you broadcast on the Celtics Newsfeed over the weekend. The other player we talked about, obviously, Danilo Gallinari with our Denver Nuggets preview, and again, all these past previews on the YouTube page at youtube.com/CLNS Media. We set up a playlist over there for all of these. You mentioned, actually, well, keep plugging away on CLNSradio.com, your written story that Gallinari has not played very much in recent years.
No, not at all, really. He hasn't played in a full season since maybe his second or third season. That was back with the Knicks. He's missed time, considerably amount of time. So he played in 63, 53, and 59 games the previous 3 seasons. He's 29 going on 30. And then not even talking about injuries right now. There's also DeAndre Jordan in there. So are you going to play Gallinari at the 3 where he's overmatched with other players' quickness, or are you going to sit Gallinari? Are you going to play Griffin and Gallinari together and just sit Jordan? There's a lot of money that's going to be on the bench at some point. So unless they make a move, and I know we'll talk about that down the line.
Yeah. Jumping back to Paul real quick. So do you think it's the correct move? Did they make the right choice? Essentially, were they choosing between Blake and Chris, and they stick it out with Blake? They give him a ton of money for a lot of years. They move on from Chris, and obviously they got a decent return, which we can talk about, and I think probably at least 1 starter, maybe 2, coming back. Is this the right choice, or would you have kept Chris and tried to move Blake?
I probably would have moved on from Chris Paul. I just think aging point guards, especially in the league where point guards are so heavy, and it's not incredibly easy to find a great point guard, but it's a lot easier than it was, 5 or 10 years ago. He's getting older. It's a lot easier to build around younger guys. And I just think it was time to move on, just from a organic standpoint of shaking things up, getting some fresh blood in there. I know Griffin and Jordan kind of had their battles with Chris Paul in the past. Not saying that that's the right route to go with every time by getting rid of the guy who's kind of causing the problems, just being overly aggressive. But you're investing a lot with Chris Paul, and investing a lot in a point guard he's great in the postseason, but I just think it's kind of hard. We see that in Boston, how hard it was to play with Isaiah. Chris Paul is, I don't know, he's 5'11", 6 feet, but he kind of plays small. He's not really a big player. It can be hard to do that in the postseason, and just to shake things up. And I wonder how much, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit, but with Jerry West coming in as a special advisor to talk, I wonder how much that kind of played in to Chris Paul leaving, or whether Chris Paul was in their plans the entire time, and he just wanted to go elsewhere and kind of see what else is out there, and kind of team up with James Harden next season. Yeah,
so with bringing in Jerry West, I think the Clippers probably maybe their best offseason move was pulling Doc's GM powers, leaving Doc to just coach the guys, just that manager of personalities, I guess, that Doc is very, very good at. He's excellent at, managing the media as well and all that stuff. The experiment ran out with his sort of trying to pick players, trying to sign free agents. It got almost to comic levels of just awfulness, bringing in some of the guys you mentioned here. So pulling him, I think that's might be their most meaningful move to come out of the offseason, especially, looking down the road.
Yes, sadly it is. Like Doc the GM, there's been saying in NBA media, Twitter, and just NBA media written content that Doc the GM continued to do Doc Rivers the coach a disservice by just failing. And in my opinion, it was two regards he failed at. Just never really addressing that swingman position, that 3 spot. I know he had Matt Barnes in there for a while. The last couple of years, Mahabute, who's a defensive first, offensive last resort kind of player, but never really addressing that position, especially when you're going up against guys like Kevin Durant. If they made the NBA Finals, obviously LeBron James, but just it's a swingman heavy league, and then also continuing to fail to develop any sort of young draft picks. I mean, if they had a young draft pick, or just like a guy that they were developing the past couple of seasons in their back pocket, the roster would look a lot better than it does right now. Or at least, they would have had a trade chip, or somebody other than like Jamal Crawford or Austin Rivers to throw in a trade. So he really kind of failed, and it just shows you how hard it is to be a GM and a coach in this league. I don't think it could be done by pretty much anyone.
Yeah, it's almost too much. One of the benefits of the Chris Paul trade, though, he will get sort of a chance to do that as a coach now. If you look at some of the return, Montrezl Harrell, Sam Decker, even Patrick Beverley, I think is only a still pretty young guy, only in his sixth season. So there are guys coming back that'll have better chance to develop, and obviously a huge gap there. Roles are up for the taking. At starting point guard, I assume will be Beverley. You mentioned Milos Teodosic. I don't know. You want to give us 15 seconds on Teodosic? You seem to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm high on him just by watching YouTube clips on him. That's I think it was Beverly or somebody just came in right away once this guy was signed and said he was the best passer in the league, and in a league full of great passers, that's saying something. He just has 5-step move ahead type of DNA in his brain where it's just so creative. I mean, it's not a guarantee that he'll come in right away and just blow the league by storm, but I think he's going to be a guy worth watching, especially if Doc just lets him kind of
he's 6'5".
freelance. Yeah, he's pretty tall. I mean, he has great court vision, so this would be an underrated move, especially if you're a league pass guy, just to kind of watch this guy.
Gonna pause this for a second. I gotta tell you guys about Bombfell. I personally despise going to the department stores, trying on all that stuff, getting fitted, paying so much money. It takes so long out of your day. I would much prefer a company like Bombfell give me my clothes. Guys want to look good, and Bombfell is simply an easier way for men to get better clothes. Fill out a simple questionnaire. You're matched with a personal stylist dedicated just to you. They'll pick out each piece. They'll email you those selections, give you a couple days to make any changes or cancel it altogether. You're in total control the whole time. And even after the clothes arrive, you get a full week to decide what you like and what you want to keep and what you want to send back. Check Bombfell out, hassle-free, sign up, tell them about yourself, your budget, your measurements, pick and choose what kind of clothes you're looking for or leave it outright to them. And of course, shipping is free both ways. And if that's not all, sign up using the promo code Garden Report and get $25 off your first purchase just for listening to CLNS Media. You can go to bombfell.com/Garden Report. That's BOMBFELL.com/Garden Report.
And don't forget Lou Williams. He was in that trade too. I mean, he's been on every team now, but professional scorer. They already have Austin Rivers, who's they had Jamal Crawford before, so they keep continuing to cycle these offensive firsts, 6'3" non-point guards into the mix. But, at the very worst, Lou Williams becomes a good trade chip for them.
Yep, and speaking of trade chips, DeAndre Jordan may be a guy that they would look into trading. Maybe not now that they brought back Blake. I'm sure they're pretty close and, hyped to stay together, but depending on how things go, he's a guy who you sort of hammer home the point on CLNSradio.com that the dude flat out can't shoot free throws. He flat out cannot play in the end of close games, and that's going to be a huge issue given I'm not sure their depth there is that strong at the center position or even in the backcourt, depending how small ball you want to play. And a lot of off-injured guys, as you say, so could DeAndre Jordan be used?
I mean, it wouldn't be the worst move, in my opinion. If you're making an investment in Gallinari and Griffin, Gallinari gets 3 years, Griffin gets 5 years. That's a long time for the foreseeable future in the NBA. You want to pair those two guys together. I think in an ideal world, Gallinari plays a stretch 4 type of position where Griffin can kind of play that 0.5 center position. He has such great passing and point guard abilities. I think he needs the ball in his hands. Jordan has really I think he's over-exceeded expectations to when he came in the league. When you consider where he's drafted and the fact that the guy's the worst free throw shooter of all time, considering the amount of attempts he's taken. But he can't play at the end of games. It's other teams are going to just gang up on him, foul him, put him in precarious situations where he has to make free throws down the stretch, and he just can't. If they want to make a move before he hits free agency, just kind of get out from under him and get just get a draft pick back, try and get a first rounder back for DeAndre. I think it would be a move worth making.
Right, and with Doc no longer being the GM and whoever making those decisions now, that's potentially even more likely with a guy who's not going to fall in love with the players that he's coaching. All right, last thing to talk about here is the matchup with the Celtics. They will play Wednesday, January 24th out in LA. Both these games are on ESPN, actually, so both nationally televised games. That's Wednesday, January 24th in LA, and then Wednesday, February 14th, for the lovers out there, Valentine's Day, at TD Garden. So a lovely date night to see the Clippers come to town.
Nothing like taking your significant other to a Clippers Celtics game. That's just that's where it's at.
Just real quick, give me how you feel like these teams match up. Beverly, obviously an excellent defender against Kyrie, but in terms of on the whole, what can the Clippers do to stymie the Celtics?
Griffin's always a difficult matchup. We haven't really seen Griffin. That's the thing. That's a big question mark, actually. I know we're not talking about how they can beat the Celtics, but just an overall big question mark for Blake Griffin. He lost a lot of his bounce the previous couple of seasons.
Yeah, like they put it on the page, a watered down version. That's
watered down version.
Yeah.
He's still if you look at his basketball reference page, the stats look pretty good. Maybe his field goal percentage is a little bit down, so you might not notice. But if you watch him play, there's no more posterizing dunks. He doesn't really have that same aggressiveness. It's almost like he lost a lot of his mojo out there. So it'd be interesting to see if he can get that bounce back, that athleticism back, that it was just out of this world, the previous, few seasons before this. But in a hypothetical playoff matchup with the Celtics, obviously Beverly, put him on Kyrie and see if he can at least stymie him a little bit, try and get into his head. I know Beverly's, one of those pests in the league. And then you really attack the Celtics on the glass. I have it written in this Clippers preview. Jordan corralled about 28 rebounds during those 2 games against the Celtics. If he's active, running to the rim, getting to the glass, and then you add in Griffin and Gallinari, if they're both kind of working their inside and outside games, give Griffin the rock, give him the ball, let him have a chance to be a playmaker. I mean, the Clippers certainly have talent. A lot of it's going to depend on the health of, obviously, Griffin and Gallinari and whether they can gel as a team this year. But, I mean, there's certainly talent on that team to kind of compete with the Celtics this season.
Definitely, and you have them 44-38. You do have them at 8th in the Western Conference in your preview. So an unlikely team to make it out of the West, but still something to definitely keep an eye on. One of the more intriguing rosters that we're going to see in the league, and obviously the tie-in with Doc Rivers is always going to be meaningful to Celtics fans from.
Yeah, no, absolutely good to keep ties on Doc to see if he can get out of this rut. The fact that Vinny Del Negro has taken the Clippers just as far as Doc Rivers has, so it's tough luck in LA, I guess.
It's scratching me. All right, He's Cory Prescott, CLNS Celtics Editor at Large. You can follow him on Twitter at CLNS_Prescott. Read this preview on CLNSradio.com. Cory, thanks for thanks for joining us, and we will be talking to you on your next preview pretty soon, I'm sure.
I don't know, I think it's Milwaukee, so no, good to be on, Mike, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Day 10 of the Boston Celtics Newsfeed's 2017-18 NBA season preview. Again, you can get more analysis on the CLNSradio.com site and view any of our previous episodes at youtube.com/CLNS Media. Follow CLNS on Twitter at CLNS Media and myself at CLNS_Walsh. Be sure to subscribe to the Celtics Newsfeed, rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and of course the CLNS Media Network's mobile podcast app. Tune back in tomorrow when I'll be speaking with Trevor Lane, host of the Lakers Nation podcast found on the CLNS Media Network. Trevor will give us his take on the Lakers offseason and how Lonzo Ball and company will match up this season against the Celtics. Until then, this is Newsfeed manager Mike Walsh signing off.